Thomas Jones is one of the directors of the Faraway CIC, and his passion is autism champions. Unfortunately, Thomas isn't able to be with us today, so he asked me if I could present the Autism Champions part of today, and so that's what I'm doing. This logo that you can see here is the logo that Thomas designed. Obviously, it links in and is associated with the Faraway CIC with the same colour, similar colour scheme with it, but it denotes really the working in partnership, hand in hand, literally, with people to champion autistic people. And I think this follows quite nicely on the back of Lucy's presentation, which I was still absolutely blown away by. I think it was couldn't have been a better showcase for autistic people and just how talented people are. I think that's it's really amazing what people can do. I'm very much in awe of that. This was Thomas's idea, the Autism Champions. Autism Champions nationally isn't new. It's been talked about a long time in the field of autism. But Thomas's idea and his vision has always been to have Autism Champions in every workplace in North East Lincolnshire. And it's something that is quite a huge thing really to strive for, and some people might say, well, why would you need autism champions in every workplace in North East Lincolnshire? But I think it goes back to the fact that the values that we have around treating everybody equally, having equal opportunities for people regardless of whether they're neurotypical, whether they're autistic or not, is something that if we can make every workplace accessible to everyone, regardless of their neurodiversity, then it will be accessible to everybody and there won't be those barriers there. So this is very much an aspiration that we all share at the Faraway CIC, is to make workplaces much more accessible. And as Laurie was saying, the 3 out of 4 people want to work, they want to have paid employment, but the way that employers potentially see autistic people, that not understanding what they need in order to make the workplace accessible to them, acts as a barrier to that, and we want to change that. What is an autism champion? It's someone who has an interest in working with autistic people, and that's you, everybody who's on this call today. That's you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You don't have to have autism in order to be an autism champion. It can just be anybody who has an interest in working with autistic people. It's someone who promotes autism awareness in their workplace and in their everyday life. It's someone who shares their learning and helps to build knowledge, skills and understanding of autism in their workplace. And it's someone who knows how to access relevant autism training for their organisation and how to access support for autistic people in the workplace. So being an autism champion doesn't mean to say that you have to provide the training for your colleagues, that you have to always be the one that shouts up or says something about that. It's just about being mindful about the needs of autistic people in the workplace and supporting colleagues, challenging colleagues sometimes around maybe their attitudes or their approaches and what they can do really to make the workplace much more accessible for everybody. And it's someone who can communicate effectively with autistic people and can advocate alongside them for reasonable adjustments that they may need in the workplace. So reasonable adjustments is actually a legal requirement on all employers that they have to make in order to enable autistic people to be able to work and to be able to function in the best way that they can in a working environment. Laurie had mentioned before, sometimes it might be kind of the bright lights and things are too much for people, and so making sure that the lighting is right, making sure that there's a quieter space where people can work. Hot desking, for example, is not something that works very well for autistic people. Being able to know where you're going, having the same place where you can be, where you're not interrupted if you're in a building, those kind of things are classed as reasonable adjustments, and they're not difficult to do, but some people just don't think about doing that. So it's about being able to advocate for that alongside the autistic person to help their voice be heard, really, and to help them not be excluded or picked on, really, ultimately. So being an autism champion, again, I think Laurie mentioned this as well, just because if you're an autistic person in a workplace, you don't have to become an autism champion as well, because sometimes people assume that, oh, you're autistic, so you know what every autistic person in the workplace needs, or you can provide the autism awareness training. That's not something that we advocate or we believe in. So it's not about that. It's not saying that every autistic person has to be an autism champion. It's not saying that at all. Autistic people, neurotypical people, anybody can be an autism champion if they want to improve the lives and working lives of everybody in the organisation. What have we done so far? So the Faraway CIC, our main objectives are to demonstrate that it's possible to employ autistic people in a way that suits them and in a way that suits the organisation. So it's a win-win situation. And employment is a focus of ours, and supporting people into employment, to maintain employment and to gain employment, to use their skills and talents to be able to generate an income for themselves so they can live better lives. That's one of the things that our focus is on in the Faraway CIC, as well as reducing isolation for people, social isolation. So what have we done so far around autism champions and employment? We've employed 3 autism mentors to support autistic people in the workplace, amongst the other things, which I've just mentioned a couple there. We've provided Autism Champion in the workplace training for staff in the Faraway CIC and the Adult Autism Service in North East Lincolnshire. That's 15 autism champions that we already have in North East Lincolnshire. We've developed our own autism awareness and autism champion training that we can deliver to local employers on request. So if you're working in an organisation and you think, actually, it'd be really helpful for our organisation to understand what they need to do in order to support an autistic person to be able to work here, let us know, because we can provide some training to raise awareness about what employers need to do to make their workplace autism friendly. So what difference does this make? So what difference can an autism champion make? I want to invite here Nikki to tell her story. She's an autism champion. She works as an autism support worker in the Adult Autism Service in North East Links. So Nikki, are you able to share your story of being an autism champion with everyone?
I am indeed. Thanks, Jane. And just to follow on from what you were saying about, that autism champions don't have to be individuals on the spectrum, I think it's really, really important that there's loads of neurotypical people that are champions, because that's what we do this for, to make a difference. And I just think from the experiences that I've had, I've not been an autism champion for long. I did the training not too long ago when the mentors started. And I think the fact that the mentors were on the courses with us gave us a bit more of an understanding and gave us a lot more of a kind of insight into what was going on. So I felt like by attending that course, it enabled me to provide that support a lot better. because I'd kind of had that experience of hearing people's experiences within employment firsthand. And it does really just add value so much, because it's so person-centred, and it's all around the individual and what would help that individual to feel more integrated within the workplace, to feel more valued. And from the experiences that I've had, you know, it definitely works. And I think it makes the staff teams and everybody that's working with that individual just work better together and work more effectively as a team, because they've got a bigger picture of what's going on. And I find that, you know, they always ask really good questions, and you can tell that employees really do want to make a difference. Sometimes they just need a little bit of a helping hand in knowing where to start. And I feel like that's where the Autism Champions can come in, and, you know, they're going to really be really effective at that. And I think it definitely needs to be within, you know, it seems quite a lot within each workplace, but why not? Why not in every workplace? You know, if that's what we're aiming for, then we might as well aim for that. And it definitely does work. And, you know, I think the more experiences people have with this and see the kind of work that people go through, and it's really complex, but it's always packaged really well as well. And it's always person-centered, so it's about what the individual needs. And I think that's what makes it so special. And, you know, the end outcome of the work that I did with the workplace, you know, it just improved the individual's experience at work, because he was able to carry out his job without, you know, the effects of the lights being too bright. You know, he was even allowed a quiet room in case things became too overwhelming. Colleagues were starting to recognise when he was becoming overwhelmed before he became overwhelmed, and were able to intercept so that it didn't become problematic. And this individual, I think, has had about 10 really good news stories, and has had really good compliments from not only staff but also from the members of the public that enter the shop, and that makes him feel really valued, because he is doing a good job, and he was before, but it's just the sensory stuff that was going on for him that made things really overwhelming. And the employers took steps to really reduce that for him, and it's just made such a difference. He's able to carry out his job more independently, he feels better for doing that, and he feels really understood. So I feel like, you know, the Autism Champion work that we do, it's just so valuable, and it's definitely worth it in every single workplace.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Nikki. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, I'd really like to hear your stories of being in the workplace, and maybe where your employer has made the reasonable adjustments that you needed, or they've been supportive, that have been helpful, that have enabled you, or there's somebody who's been your autism champion without even being a formal autism champion, but someone who has supported you in the workplace. I'd like to ask you if you could use the chat function to do that, but I can't actually see the chat function now. I'm sharing my whole screen, so I wonder if Neil, if you could monitor the chat for me, and just share people's stories if they're willing to share any of their experiences in the workplace. And it doesn't have to be positive as well. If people want to share some of the difficulties they've experienced in the workplace as well, maybe we can talk about what we could do differently around that, how we might help with that.
Absolutely. And if people want to either use the chat to do that, or use the Q&A box to do that, no problem at all. If someone's feeling brave, we can bring them onto screen if you want to talk about anything that relates to the workplace, or how autism has affected you in the workplace. I think people would be absolutely fascinated by that. So yeah, please feel free to contact by any means.
Oh, for some reason my chat function's just popped up. I don't know whether you worked some magic there or something, Neil, but it's just turned up, which is fun. So
I'm going to pretend that I did, but I didn't.
So Seb, you first said that when you were working for M&S back in York, you weren't diagnosed at that time, so it wasn't really tested in your employment. And Laurie says feels so lucky to be part of the adult autism service as well. and feels like how I feel about myself means as much as my work. I think, yeah, I agree completely, Laurie. I think it's great that you've been able to work as an autism support worker in the adult autism service, and seeing you grow in confidence in that role as well is fantastic, I think. And then all the things that you're doing with the Faraway CIC, just the sky's the limit for people, and that's what really that's what I get from doing this work. Jonathan Fazani, sorry Jonathan if I'm pronouncing that wrong. You've only had negative experiences that have made you feel so bad that that's led to suicide attempts, and that's, I think that's, thank you for sharing that, Jonathan, because it's that it does make people feel like that, doesn't it? Your experience of how you're treated by people makes you has a big impact on your self-esteem and your self-worth, and the value that you place on yourself as well as other people do that. So it doesn't get any worse than that, and that's why it's really, really important for us to try and encourage employers really to think about the impact that they have on their employees, and do everything that they can to make sure that's a positive impact.
Jane, are we at the end of the presentation, the champions presentation?
No, we're not. Not quite. I'm going to, there's some other things coming through chat that I want to pick up on, if that's okay, Neil.
No, sure. I was just going to bring us all back onto screen if it's a bit easier than talking to two tiny little boxes at the top corner. But
okay.
We'll carry on this way until we've got to the end of the presentation, then we can come back onto the panel and bring Laurie in and bring some of the other guys in as well.
So I'm going to come back to Peter in a moment, but Emma Skinner, you've put there about when you worked in offices, you worked for Action for Employment, and it was a telemarketing role, and you quit when your boss wouldn't let you work in an office alone. It was an open plan office, and by job, the job was telemarketing. You quit because the open plan office affected your hypersensitivity. I'm laughing because you put an ugh sound there. And again, you weren't diagnosed at the time, so I think that's been the key, is that people find it really difficult to ask for support, or to have support, or even the employer to take people seriously, because they haven't got a diagnosis, and so the employer's not under any obligation then legally to make the adjustments.
But having said that as well, Jane, I think employers, I suspect no one out there wants to provide a workplace that's not conducive to people that they employ. And I think some of the work that we were talking about earlier around the Autism Champions is around raising awareness, isn't it? It's that thing, isn't it? No one wants to do a bad job. No one really wants to provide a workplace that is disadvantaging people, but raising awareness of what may be disadvantaging people is part and parcel of that education process for employers as well as people working for organizations.
That's right, yeah. And I think I mean, Jo makes a good comment here as well, is that she thinks it's important to find something that shows that you are valued, and it's not always through paid work, although that helps obviously. But yeah, showing anything that shows you that you're valued. And I think that's why I really like the presentation that Lucy did earlier, and the work that Lucy's doing as well, connecting with other people through shared interest, and doing something where you get that reinforcement of what you're doing makes a difference, and it's useful, and it is valued by the people, is really empowering. So that works really well. Peter, can I invite you to share your story around work before you were working as an autism mentor and now?
So my experience with employment beforehand, so I was diagnosed quite late. I was diagnosed at 24. So before that, I'd worked probably over 20 jobs, and I'd probably been fired from 16 plus employments. I had a diagnosis of ADHD, which I always declared on employment, but quite a lot of the jobs I just took because I thought you needed to get into employment, and they involved tasks that were repetitive and lasted all day long, like hanging bananas up in Morrison's. So I really struggled, and it was only when I started volunteering I got a volunteer opportunity once I got my autism diagnosis. So I started volunteering with a local organisation, and then I was offered full-time employment with them. So I started full-time employment. I again struggled through employment, but learned some really good skills. And then the opportunity to apply to work for the Faraway CIC came up. And by that time I realised that I needed to find an employment that was supported and that was set up to support me, and the adjustments were made. And it didn't feel like there was it was a bad thing that I was asking for these adjustments. It was just reasonable to expect that these adjustments were made. And ever since joining the Faraway CIC, I've felt really supported. And if we can then offer that to others going forward and support them, and through the championship training, obviously get employers to support employees like the Faraway CIC model has, then I think that's only a positive, and it's really good going forward.
Oh, thanks, Peter. Thank you very much for sharing that story. I really appreciate it, and as well as Laurie says, thank you to everyone for sharing your stories, both the good and the bad experiences that you've had. So if I try and carry on that second with this presentation, this is just the last part of this, and really it's a shout out to yourselves. Do you want to become an autism champion in your life or your workplace? Is there something that you think, actually, that interests me, that's something that I'd like to do? Because we can provide training and support for you to be an autism champion if that's something you want to do. Do you want to that's a spell. I said, you want to raise awareness about autism in your workplace? Is that something that you'd be interested in doing, in terms of taking that role on specifically in your workplace? Whether or not you're an autistic person, it doesn't matter. You can still take on that role if you want to. Do you want to know how to make reasonable adjustments to make your workplace autism friendly? So if there are any employers that are on the call today, or if you work for an organisation and you think that your employer might be interested in knowing how to make their workplace autism friendly, then let us know. Again, we can help with that. And does your organisation want to benefit from the skills and expertise that autistic people can bring to the workplace? As we've seen today, just been showcased earlier on, the skills and expertise that autistic people have often surpass those of neurotypicals, yeah, they can bring so much more to the workplace than neurotypical people alone can as well. So if your organisation wants to benefit from that, or any of the above, if you've answered yes or maybe even to any of those questions, please contact us at info@farawaycic.org, or you can contact us on the telephone number that's there as well. Okay. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope I've covered everything that Thomas would have covered in his presentation had he been able to do that today. And if you've got any questions or want to ask anything about, again, use the Q&A or the chat function, or you can contact us afterwards about it. Thank you.
Fabulous. Can I just ask a few questions, Jane, if that's okay? I'm going to stop interrogating you, and it's because you're on screen in front of me. Laurie, do you mind joining us, if that's okay?
Yeah, that's...
Can we have young Master Rudram as well?
You may.
Fabulous. Now Jane's taken the opportunity to do one. I was just going to ask you, Laurie, in terms of an occupational setting, what sort of things are we talking about around making that more conducive to an individual with autism?
So this can be, I think we've had a little bit about maybe having a quiet space for somebody that is struggling with hypersensitivity as a way of escaping that area, so they can feel more comfortable. For our autism mentors in particular, we have flexible hours, and we work with them to make sure that the job role reflects what their competencies are and what they feel definitely comfortable with doing in their job role. In other workplaces, it can be as simple as having somebody that they can go to say if there's something that's distressing them, or if there's something they don't fully understand, because sometimes it's just that understanding that we just need. It's sometimes kind of hard where, you know, if somebody says something that we don't fully understand, like, oh, were they meaning that horribly about me, or was that a joke? And sometimes we just need that little bit of an answer there, and it can be just so beneficial just to have that, yeah, yes, no, and someone specifically to go to, and to have somebody that has that background, and that kind of the way of figuring out whether the workplace is autism friendly on these different levels before becoming an autism champion is just such a benefit to the workplace.
Fabulous. Andy, do you mind speaking a little bit about your role?
So yes, so I work within the Adult Autism Service as an autism support worker alongside Laurie, Julie, who on my screen's there, and Nikki, who on my screen's there. And we provide a lot of emotional support and to adults with autism within North East Lincolnshire. And we do that in an abundance of ways, in terms of kind of low-level talking therapy, such as cognitive behavioural therapy and mindfulness. We liaise with employers in relation to workplace adaptations and other supporters. We provide kind of practical support for adults with autism in terms of managing things like going outside with manageable anxiety, with accessing public transport, accessing healthcare services, accessing local amenities, local places like cafes. That last one's become a bit more harder during COVID time, as we're all aware. And fundamentally, it's just about being that kind of providing that one-to-one support for adults with autism within North East Lincolnshire, and we do that in a person